The New York Giants hired Joe Judge to be their next head coach. And he was a Patriots special teams coordinator. He was also the wide receivers coach for the New England Patriots. He's worked for both Nick Saban at Alabama, won national championships there. He's also coached under Bill Belichick. He won Super Bowls with the Patriots there. When he was hired, I went, who in the world is Joe Judge? I've never heard of that guy in my entire life. And that was alarming to me because you hear a lot of names circulate. You hear the name Josh McDaniels is the Patriots offensive coordinator. You hear his name basically anytime any team ever, fires a head coach. You hear, is Josh McDaniels going to be the next head coach of the Panthers, of the Cowboys, of the Browns, of this or that, or literally every team possible. And I've never heard Joe Judge's name circulated before in my entire life. So when he was hired, I was like, that's bizarre and that's weird. So look, I decided to wait. I decided to just take time, sit and listen. 2 days ago, if you had Googled Joe Judge's name, you wouldn't have found Joe Judge. The only video you could find of him talking about football or doing any interview or anything was an interview from him earlier this year, actually talking about, Antonio Brown and the impact Antonio Brown had on the Patriots at that time. So I got to hear Joe Judge speak and give, some of his philosophy on coaching today. I guess it was earlier today when he did his introductory press conference talking to the New York Giants media. They also released an interview the Giants did with him in it. And, wow, I loved everything that Joe Judge said. I was like, this is a really well-spoken guy. I have no idea if Joe Judge can be a good NFL head coach. I don't. I mean, he's never done the job before. And immediately what that does is bring to my mind Freddie Kitchens, the former Browns head coach, who'd never been a head coach before, got hired off as an assistant coach to be a head coach. And that obviously failed miserably. Now, there's a key difference between Freddie Kitchens and Joe Judge. We'll get to it in just a minute. But I got to say, a number of things impressed me about Joe Judge. Number one is he went from, people don't realize this, he was an assistant coach at a Division III college football team in Birmingham, Alabama. That's, no offense to Division III. I used to play Division III football. It's nothing. It's basically glorified high school football. The fact that Joe Judge was able to go from a Division III football team in Alabama and go from that assistant coaching job and they get hired directly from there to Alabama. Nick Saban noticed Joe Judge when Joe Judge was at a Division III college in Alabama. That's a big deal. That never happens to see a guy go from Division III to Division I. That jump is rare and is really probably to me, that tells me, wow, Joe Judge is an outstanding coach. Good head coach or not, I have no idea. But clearly he's done some impressive stuff and impressed a lot of people. To go from a Division III college football team to Alabama, of all places, that's a big deal. And that should not be overlooked, and that really should be praised. Oh, that's clear evidence. Hey, Joe Judge, obviously something about him is a pretty impressive guy. But then everything Joe Judge said in his interview and in his press conference spoke to me. I mean, he has lofty goals for the New York Giants, and you can call that naive if you want, but I don't mind a guy who says, look, I want to do this and this and this, and I have high expectations. It's okay to dream. It's okay to want. It's okay to have high goals and high expectations. I think you should. One of the things that Joe Judge preached in his press conference was toughness. He said 3 words and 3 things that really matter to him: smart, tough, and fundamentally sound football. I was like, okay, I like that. He wants coaches who teach the game. He also mentioned that the human element matters. Coaches are not just coaching people; they're coaching people. Like, athletes are human beings and deserve to be treated that way. I was like, oh, a guy coming from New England, that's surprising to hear. That's pretty cool. And then he kept saying he wants a hard-nosed football team that reflects the attitude of New Yorkers, the people, the Giants fan base, the blue-collar workers in New York. He wants a football team that reflects the attitude of the New York fan base of the Giants. I thought that was cool. We'll come back to that because there is a concern in that sentence. I think the attitude, though, the idea, the direction he's trying to go with that statement is really good. We'll talk about where I think it went off the rail a little bit down the road in a minute. But this is why, number one, overall, I believe Joe Judge has an opportunity to succeed as a Giants head coach. Again, I said earlier, he's never been a head coach before. And that's a red flag because it makes me think of Freddie Kitchens, the former Browns head coach who got fired because he clearly had no idea what he was doing. But the thing I hated watching about Freddie Kitchens that drove me nuts was Freddie Kitchens never, ever adapted. He never was able to build a team or build an offense that worked to the strengths of his players. He had Odell Beckham Jr., and he used him horribly. It drove me nuts. It infuriated me. the one thing that Joe Judge kept saying that I loved above everything else is he kept talking about making adjustments and being flexible. I was like, yes, thank you, Jesus Christ, if you're real, that makes me so happy. He talked about his philosophy with a football team is to make adjustments to beat his opponents. And I was like, oh, thank you. That makes me so happy because that's so important. That's a gigantic part of being a coach is being flexible and understanding that, hey, I'm going to cater my offense and cater my football team and cater the schemes we're running to fit the needs of our players. And Joe Judge clearly understands that fundamental part of coaching. Oh, yeah, I can't say it enough. Yes, it makes me so happy. Joe Judge gets it. Great coaches adapt their system to the players. A lot of coaches don't understand that. They try to, the wrong way to do it is to force your players to adapt to a system. Joe Judge understands that's the wrong way to do it. He's going to adapt his system to his players. Oh, yes. Now, he's not going to be a coordinator at all. This is a really cool, really important detail is that he's going to hire 3 people. He's going to hire a defensive coordinator, he's going to hire an offensive coordinator, and he's going to hire a special teams coordinator. Obviously, he's going to hire a lot more people than just those 3, but the fact that he's not going to have a hand in either one of those as a coordinator is a big deal because he can step back, he can oversee everything, he can delegate and oversee operations. Again, yes, this is a huge deal. It's really good. And I love the way that Joe Judge talks about evaluating players. He uses a lot of depth when he talks about evaluating players. He talks about their skill sets, their habits. He's not a guy that talks about statistics. Like, statistics matter. I was on the phone with someone who works in the NFL today, and the point was like, look, film doesn't lie. I don't care how many touchdowns you have. I care about what are your habits. There are a lot of things in football that do not show up on statistics and on stat sheets that still matter in football. Joe Judge understands that. I love that. He's very detail-oriented. You can just tell by the way he speaks. It leaks out of him. And I also love that he kept saying, I have an outsider's perspective on the New York Giants. He did not pretend to be an authority. He wouldn't commit to anything. He's like, in a good way, in a healthy way, he said, look, I don't know what system we're going to run yet. I don't know this, I don't know that. I know we're going to have this attitude. We're going to be a hard-nosed football team. We're going to work hard. We're going to grind. We're going to punch you in the mouth. But I don't know what systems we're going to run because he shouldn't be able to answer that question yet because he needs to take time. He needs to watch film. He needs to meet with more players. He needs to evaluate the strengths of their football team before he can say that. So I really love the honesty when he said, I have an outsider's perspective on the New York Giants. I don't know. I've played against them yet, but I've not been their coach long enough and done enough research to have a educated answer of my approach yet to build a football team and build an offense around our players. I thought that was really, really cool. Now the self-awareness to understand that, he needs to design a system around the strengths of his players. And he would have been lying if he just said, oh, we're going to do this and this and this because he isn't ready for that. And so I love that. So I love almost everything that Joe Judge said. There are 3 concerns I have after Joe Judge's introductory press conference. I'm not sold that Joe Judge is going to work as a Giants head coach, but I will tell you this. I'm rooting for him. I really like his approach. I think he's got his heart in the right spot, and that's really cool to me. But here are my 3 concerns about Joe Judge as a head coach. Number 1 is he needs to hire the right coordinators. Daniel Jones needs a good offensive coordinator. I don't care. Look, if Joe Judge isn't going to be a coordinator of anything, he's got to hire 3 men, offensive, special teams, and defensive coordinators that know what the heck they're doing. And so that's a huge step and a hurdle for Joe Judge. He's going to have to hire well. Number 2 is, I heard Joe Judge talk a lot about this idea of teaching. And that's great to talk about. But it's odd because in New England, Joe Judge had a very difficult job, a job that I don't think anybody else, I can't think of another person who had 2 roles the way that Joe Judge had in the NFL. Number 1, he was a Patriots special teams coordinator, but he had a dual role. He also was the wide receivers coach, and that's no small, most people have one job or the other, not both. Now, I got to acknowledge, though, he talks about teaching, he talks about how he loves to teach and he wants to hire teachers, and he did a great job as a special teams coordinator in New England, but he really did not impress me as the wide receivers coach of the Patriots. In fact, the Patriots wide receiving core was the worst part of their football team last year. Their wide receivers were awful. And the fact that Philip Dorsett and N'Keal Harry, I know N'Keal Harry was hurt for a large majority of the year, but the young receivers for the Patriots made the same mistakes week 1 as they did week 17, they didn't progress. And so Joe Judge talks a lot about teaching. Is he actually a good teacher? I have no idea, because what we saw on one hand with special teams, clearly he knows what he's doing. With the wide receivers last year with the Patriots, they didn't make progress that they needed to make. And whether that's on the players or that's on the coach, or maybe he was spread too thin because he had to coach receivers and special teams, I have no idea. But to be clear, I don't know whether or not Joe Judge can coach and can teach. And I'm a little bit skeptical because of the way that the poor performance we got from the Patriots receiving corps last year. Now, number 3, this is my third fear about Joe Judge. I think a lot of New York fans are going to agree with this. My fear is that NFL free agents and people that potentially could play for the Giants listened to that press conference today in New York and went, oh, I'm good. I don't want to play for the Giants. That does not sound fun at all. That doesn't sound interesting. He sounds very demanding, and that's not necessarily bad. It's a blessing and a curse. For Joe Judge to be very demanding, he's going to attract the kind of guys that he's going to attract. His kind of people, his tribe of people, they're going to be attracted to New York to play for the Giants. People who want to work really hard. But there was one thing Joe Judge said that I was concerned about, because he talked about live tackling in practice. I don't know of any NFL teams that actually do wrap-up tackling where you kind of go through the motions, you wrap up. But in the NFL, the expectation is you know how to tackle, and you don't want guys to get hurt. You don't want to destroy their bodies. So I can't think of a scenario where there's an NFL team that does live tackling in practice. That sounds very like Division III college football-esque. So I don't know what Joe Judge is talking about there. That makes me pretty uncomfortable. And my fear is that maybe players hear that and go, yeah, New York sounds demanding and awful and intense, and I'm good. But again, the kind of player that's a blessing and a curse, the kind of player who's attracted to New York, when they hear Joe Judge talk that way, he's going to get his kind of guy. So again, it's both positive and negative. So I have some concerns. But overall, I love Joe Judge's messaging. Again, I go back to that, his willingness to be flexible and adapt his systems to work with the players in New York. Round of applause. That's phenomenal. I cannot wait to see what coordinators he in fact hires down the road. I keep hearing a lot of names that I go, that's interesting or weird or who knows, but I think that the Giants have potential. There's an opportunity here. I don't know that Joe Judge is going to be successful. There are some of the coaches that were hired, and I'm like, I'm sold. That's a great hire. Joe Judge is not a hire where I'm like, clearly that's going to work. But I will say, listening to that introductory press conference gave me a lot more confidence, and this video would have sounded, and this topic would have sounded a lot different if I'd done it 2 days ago before I knew anything about Joe Judge. The more I hear and the more I listen to Joe Judge, the more I go, you know what? He's got good ideas. He's headed in the right direction. Let's see if he can execute those ideas. But I do think Joe Judge has the right mindset and has his heart in the right place. And we got to figure out if it's going to work or not. But I love Joe Judge. I'm a big fan of his. I'm rooting for him. I hope he succeeds as a head coach of the New York Giants. Oh, and by the way, here, one more thing about Joe Judge. A lot of people are saying that he's just a special teams coordinator. That's really, really silly. That's a bad argument. If you're going to tear down Joe Judge because, he's just a special teams coordinator, you do understand that John Harbaugh, the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, who have, by the way, won a Super Bowl, a very successful head coach. He's the number 1 seed in the AFC right now with the Baltimore Ravens. He was a special teams coordinator before he accepted the job as the head coach of the Ravens. So it's very possible for a coach to go from the title of special teams coordinator to a successful head coach. If that's your criticism of Joe Judge, that he was a special teams coordinator, nobody goes from that role to head coach, it's happened before. John Harbaugh did it. He won a Super Bowl. He's a phenomenal head coach. So don't give me that. If that's your criticism of Joe Judge, you're silly and you're wrong. And in fact, I actually think that Joe Judge's experience as a special teams coordinator is in fact a strength, because it really helped him understanding the process of player evaluation. Once again, I am so excited. I'm rooting for, and I hope Joe Judge is successful. I love his philosophy as a head coach. Will he work? No idea. Hope he does, though. I am really rooting for Joe Judge in New York.